This is Ralph Emery along with Justin Tubb and an American legend, Ernest Tubb. You've never sung together, have you?
No.
And before this show, I'd have swore up and down you had. I used to have a little extended play album featuring Ernest and Justin Tubb. But you have informed me you didn't sing together even then.
We were both on the same record, but he sung two and I sang two.
This was a tribute EP we issued as a tribute to Jimmie Rodgers. He did two of Jimmie's songs, and I did two of them.
Ernest, what'd you say about Anne Murray?
I say I love her. She's a beautiful girl and a good singer, but I wish she would change her hairdo.
She has changed from the straight hair to the curly hair.
Has she curled it? I haven't seen
Oh,
it.
yeah. All over her head, I'm telling
John
you.
Denver used to have hair alike.
She told me a story when she was in Nashville, and she was on the CMA special. You were on that show, Ernest.
Right, uh-huh.
She said that she called her mama. Said, "Mama, I've got an afro." And she said, "You're kidding." She said, "No, Mom, I'm not kidding. I've got an afro." And so her mama said, "Well, then you're stupid." And I'm quoting Anne Murray.
I love her mama.
Ernest Tubb is my guest. Ernest, I want to ask you a very personal question because so many people ask me this. How old is Ernest Tubb?
Well, you know what I usually answer? I'm younger than Roy Acuff, but really and truly, I don't mind, Ralph. I was born February the 9th, 1914. I'm 60 years young.
Okay. Now, do you think you'll ever retire?
I'm going to leave it up to the people. I told an old boy in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he said, "How long are you going to keep singing? Why don't you retire?" He said, "How long are you going to keep this up? As long as you pay your money to come through that front door."
I'll tell you a funny story. He doesn't even know this. We worked Houston on the same night one night. He was working at Cook's Hoedown, I believe, and I was working out of town in a suburb called Angleton, or somewhere close. And after my show was over, I had a high school show, and I went down to Cook's to see him. And this was like the last show, about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I went into the restroom, and a couple of old boys walked in, and they had been drinking a little much, and they didn't know I was in there, or if they did, they didn't know who I was. But he said, "He can't tell me he don't dye his hair. He's got to be 70 years old if he's a day." And this was 15 years ago.
Justin, you perhaps thought I would ask you this story. I've talked to Bobby Bare on this show about people impersonating Bobby Bare. But I think even before Bobby ever told me his story, you told me about a situation in Indianapolis one time. And this show plays over WIRE in Indianapolis, so it might be interesting for those folks up there.
Okay, I'll try to shorten it because it's quite a long, drawn-out story. But I was working a place up there called the Sherman Bar or something like that. It was a country music club. And I had a friend there at the time who was on the police force. And he came out and said, "Can you get a break?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, come on downtown with me." And he was off duty at the time, but he took me downtown to this little old bar. And there was a guy in there billing himself as Justin Tubb. So I went inside and we sat, and he sang not a song of mine, but he sang all of my dad's songs, you know. And so I said, "Well, that's a giveaway right there, because I don't even know, that many Ernest Tubb songs." So we told the owner, that this guy was a phony. So we went outside on the sidewalk, and he said, "Well, can you prove you're Justin Tubb?" Well, I had...
You mean the policeman took you out?
Yeah, took the owner outside and the guy who said he was me, see. And he looked nothing like me, absolutely nothing. But he asked me for my identification. Well, I had my stage clothes on, and my street clothes were back at the club with all my wallet and my driver's license. I had not one thing to prove that I was Justin Tubb. And he said, well, and he pulled his driver's license out, and sure enough, he had a driver's license that said Justin Tubb. But finally, this policeman thought, and he went in the back of his trunk, and he had an old scrapbook that had my picture in it, and showed it to the guy. And it looked enough like me to convince the guy that booked him in there that he had booked the wrong man. And we turned around, and he was headed off down the street with his guitar in one hand, and he was turning the corner just as we looked up.
Did you go in and do the next set?
No, I had to get back to the club.
But you mean in that town on that one night, 2 clubs were featuring Justin Tubb?
Right, and I still don't know whether the owner was aware of the fact or whether he was trying to cash in on the fact, but we put a stop to it.
Well, you folks in Indianapolis, we want you to know we have the genuine article here on this show. Ernest, what was that story you were going to clean up and tell on this show?
Well, Justin reminded me of it, telling about the boy in Indianapolis, Ralph. Oline, Mrs. Tubb, and I were on vacation. We was out in the West, and I said, we was in New Mexico to be exact, and I said, let's sort of hide away. And I hadn't shaved in 2 days, and I said, let's take this back road, and we'll just see where it goes to, you know. So we drove, and that evening, just about sundown, I'm getting very tired, and we're looking for motels, and it was all just little bitty wide places in the road, no motels, anything. So come to this little town, there was a bar, you know, and I went in to get something to drink, cool to drink, you know, and when I went into the bar, just in through the door was a group setting up their western, you know, the country group, getting ready for a dance, and they was in there tuning. They got all tuned up, and I'm sitting there drinking a Coke, and they came out, and remember, I've got a two-day growth beard, no hat. No, you know, just a shirt, and those boys, I kept wondering, you know, I was curious. So finally I said, who are you going to play to? You know, they said, well, you'll be here at 8 o'clock at night, and you'll see a lot of people. And so they seemed real nice kids, and I said, well, I think I'll so I introduced myself, you know, and I said, I'm Ernest Tubb, you know, and I said, how's it going, you know, and I won't talk. You know, I was getting lonesome for the Grand Ole Opry, and this was a Saturday night. And so I sat there and chatted a while and picked up some Cokes to take out, you know, and one of the other boys came out. Here's my bass player. He introduced me to him, you know, and we chatted for about 10 minutes. So just as I went out the door, I heard this bass player says, Ernest Tubb, my foot, you know. and I was telling Oline that, you know, what happened. She said, well, you said you didn't want to be recognized. And he said, you wasn't. But it tickled me in a way because I didn't really think how bad I really looked, you know.
I wonder what he really did say. Let me ask you a question. We hear about awards all the time, but back when you and Roy Acuff and Jimmy Davis and so many were making hits in the 40s, there weren't any awards, were there?
No. In fact, there wasn't even any country music charts in the trade magazines, which remind me, I remember Bob Austin way back when he was trying to start a country music chart in Cashbox magazine, and I'm one of the people that helped him. He wrote me and asked me what I thought about it and so forth, and how if I would give him some information about how the records are doing here and so forth, and this was back in I'd say about 1944, I guess.
My, how
there wasn't even any charts back then, you know.
Thanks a lot, Ernest. Don't you have that written on the back of your guitar?
I have the thanks, you know, which was on Jimmy's guitar, and that's where I got the idea.
Jimmie Rodgers' guitar?
Jimmie Rodgers' guitar. Just had thanks, and then later I put it on my guitar also.
Now, at the end of a show, what do? Just turn
the guitar over. Mm-hmm.
And they see the big thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And you just put in the other part.
Well, the Thanks a Lot album, they took the picture of the guitar, and then they put a lot underneath the sign on the guitar, the thanks on the guitar.
I see. Well, where do you start with a legend? Ernest Tubb is a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame. And I don't know how long you've been in show business, Ernest.
Actually, I'd say professionally, Ralph, since about 1941, I would say.
JT, how long have you been in show business?
Since 53.
You started as a disc jockey, didn't you?
Right.
A singing disc jockey.
Well, actually, I started writing songs first in 1951. So I guess I would go back that far then.
Have you ever gone by the handle Little Texas Troubadour?
When I was 8 years old. I grew out of that.
I presume it was always the plan for you to be in show business.
Well, for a while, I kind of rebelled against it because everybody said, well, he's going to be, just like his daddy. I heard it so much that I said, well, I'm going to show him that I can do something else. So I went to college at the University of Texas for about a year with the intention of becoming a writer. In fact, in high school, I was sports editor of our high school paper. And that's what I wanted to do, was get into sports and write. But I got waylaid after about 8 months at the University of Texas.
The music bug got him.
Yeah.
That's what happened. Yeah, actually, he sang from the time he was 3 years old till he was, I guess, about 11. And we used to have a show here on WSM, the early shows before the Opry started, called Carter's Chick Program. We used to put him in a chair and he'd sing on the show up until he was about 11. So one Saturday night we were coming in and he said, "Daddy, you mind if I go to a show? Picture show this Western on Gene Autry or something down the street." And I said, "Go ahead." So the next Saturday he done the same thing. And I said, "Son, are you just dodging this show? I said, don't you want to sing anymore?" He said, "I'd rather not." I said, "Well, forget about it. You don't have to sing." And he said, "I get embarrassed getting up in that chair." So he never did sing anymore until he was in college. And then all of a sudden, he's got a band organized down there and playing for dances. Also going to college and playing for dances about 2 or 3 nights a week, I believe.
Right.
Justin Tubb is what?
I don't even think they call it Justin Tubb, because I had a couple of cousins were down there with me. I think they call it the Tubb Boys.
Ex-Lincoln and
Doug,
and
Douglas Glenn.
You ever been a disc jockey?
I don't believe. Yes, I have been.
With Jerry Thomas.
I used to do work with Jerry out there. Also, I used to tape a show for the station that Hank Snow and I had over in Kentucky.
That's right.
We used to tape a DJ
show. You used to
show.
own some radio stations.
Yeah, Hank and I had a couple of them, and I got rid of my part. I think he's got rid of his finally.
Ernest, I want to ask you about Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard, who is the rage, began his career in the mid-'60s, as the rage of the '70s. Does he compare to any of the old-time singers?
I certainly think so, Ralph. I was talking with a country DJ here last week, and he said, you've helped people and sort of picked out some of the people that wound up on the Grand Ole Opry. And I said, yes. And he asked me then, he remembered Hank Williams and then Johnny Cash that I was instrumental in bringing to the Grand Ole Opry. And then he said, what do you think about? I said, who do you think's that you could compare along those lines with any of the newer boys? I said, well, I think Merle Haggard. To me, Merle Haggard is the greatest country artist that's come along following Johnny Cash. This boy has a lot of talent.
That's a nice tribute to Mr. Haggard.
Well, he deserves it. He really does.
Justin, I want to ask you about a song
Yes.
you made up one time. And I think your agents at that time were Lucky and Larry Moeller.
Oh, my goodness.
And you made up this little song based on a popular song of the day. Do you recall what I'm talking about?
Yes, I sure
Hello,
do.
Lucky.
Hello, Lucky. Hello, Larry. Here I am.
What was the takeoff on?
Hello, Mama. Hello, Papa. It's about the kid that went to summer camp. I forget the guy's name that did it, but he did a lot of parody records, and it was a kid writing home, telling how things were at camp.
How did yours go?
It was a long, drawn-out thing, but our best first verse was Hello, Lucky. Hello, Larry. Here I am in Tucumcari or something.
It was Alan Sherman did that.
Alan Sherman. That's
I want you to sing a little of it.
Oh, me. Well, let's see. It went, hello, Lucky. Hello, Larry. Here I am in Tucumcari. And this band is BC Vintage. And I'm tired of working show dates on percentage. That's all I can think of.
You like to write parodies?
Yeah, I get a kick out of it. It's kind of a good workout with rhyming patterns and different words.
Have you written any lately?
No. After Moeller dropped me from their booking agency after I wrote that one, I quit writing them for a while. No, I'm just kidding.
Ernest, does it bug you when some of your Yankee fans call you Ernie Tubbs?
Well, it used to, but I'm sort of getting used to it now because a lot of them do it,
Well, they mean well by it, don't they?
They do. They're just being friendly.
Because I've heard more of them say to me, I love that Ernie Tubbs.
What really bugs me, Ralph, is when they put up on the marquee, put an A in Ernest and an S on Tubb, They get both names wrong.
It's Ernest.
Right, Tubb.
Okay.
I spelled it for a guy one time. He's, oh, yeah, Ernest Tubbs.
Ernest, we're going to take a serious moment in this show. We're going to make a moment that's very serious. You entered the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1968, I believe.
1965, Ralph. 1965.
You sure about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing I'll remember for a long time.
I guess you
I
were
was
pretty
real thrilled.
excited, weren't you?
I certainly was. It was. I was so excited I couldn't talk. Justin used to accuse me of talking too much on the midnight show. I said, "You don't have to worry tonight, son. I can't think of a thing to say."
What do you recall? What you did say?
Well, the best I remember, I said, "I appreciate being, getting elected to the Hall of Fame. I probably don't deserve it, but I'm glad somebody thought I did."
Well, what we have here, before Tex Ritter died, we put together an album in tribute to all the members of the Hall of Fame at that time. We did this series about 2 or 3 years ago, and Tex Ritter came into this very studio, and what he is reading here is what is written on the big bronze plaque at the Country Music Hall of Fame. So here is Tex Ritter with his tribute to Ernest Tubb.
Ernest Tubb, February the 9th, 1914. The Texas troubadour, that tall man with a distinctive voice and style, who became a giant among the early performers of country and western music, and whose career has never diminished from the succeeding years. To his millions of fans, he has become a legend. Their love is boundless. To the fledgling artist, songwriter, or friend, his hand and his help have always been extended. Their gratitude is universal. Elected to the Hall of Fame in 1965, Ernest Tubb.
1964, when Tex Ritter entered the Hall of Fame, you apparently were in cahoots with a lot of people to get him down to the auditorium, weren't you, Ernest?
It was at the theater, I believe.
Tennessee Theater.
Tennessee Theater, and they were showing the. I think that was the night they was also going to. No, they had a show the night before. Anyhow, it was Hank Williams' Cheating Heart was showing there, or had showed the night before or something. And yes, I was there, and old Hank Tex was back there talking, and when they read the...
Well, didn't they tell Tex that you were to be...
Yeah, they told Tex, and so Tex, they told him to be sure and get me, so he walked up, when they got to the end of it, he walked up to lead me up to the stage, and they said Tex Ritter, and he said, well, wait a minute, what's the matter? He said, that's supposed to be you. And he was really kind of shook up, And
that's when he went into the Hall of Fame?
Yes, right.
And you went in a year later then?
Right, and this is the first time that I've heard this cut on the album, Ralph, a tribute, and I could think of no one that I'd rather have do this introduction than Tex Ritter. He's the greatest when it comes to something like this.
You wrote that song, didn't you?
Oh, yes,
When was it a hit?
The fall of 1941.
Right before World War II, then?
In fact, World War II just about killed it, and they didn't sell 1 million records till after the war was over, because when the war broke out, they cut the material shortage. We had a shellac shortage. They only pressed 10% of my records till the war was over. And so finally, after the war was over, I finally sold over 1 million records.
I see. That's a long time to wait.
It was.
Justin, are you frustrated at being Ernest Tubb's son, or have you been?
Well, I have
living in the shadow.
My moments when it does bother me a little bit. When I feel like maybe that I'm not being appreciated for what I can really do,
I know one time, I'm going to quote you.
Probably.
A long time ago, you said, I wish I could be somebody besides Ernest Tubb's son and Goldie Hill's singing partner.
Right. I'll take that. I can understand, his feeling there. But I think I don't think it bothers him really now as it did when he was, younger and starting out.
I thought Hank Williams Jr. said it very well when he recorded a song called Standing in the Shadows.
Right.
About his daddy.
I thought that was great.
Ernest, you like songs that say baby, don't you?
I sure do.
You've recorded a lot of tunes that had the word baby in them, haven't you?
Right, I was trying to think the one that you don't have to be a baby to cry.
Yeah.
May I tell you something funny that's connected with that song?
Sure.
You may have heard this, but the late Red Foley, who was so close and dear to me, he came in the studio just as I was recording this over at the old Tulane Hotel, you remember? And so he standing there with the late Paul Cohen listening, and when you don't have to be a baby to cry. So when we was playing the playback, Paul looked up at Red when I got to that, you don't have to be a baby to cry. He says, don't you wish you could do that? Red said, don't he wish he could do it?
Ernest, where does the Texas Troubadour come from?
Well, actually, when I started singing before even on record, Ralph, back in everybody had a title, Jimmie Rodgers, the singing brakeman, and I remember the street singer, And so I thought, well, if I'm going to sing, I ought to get me a title. So I looked in the dictionary and I found the word troubadour. I liked the word troubadour. Saw the definition of it, which fit what I want to do very well. It's a strolling musician or strolling singer that strolls all over the country and
You don't
entertains
stroll,
people.
you ride a bus.
Well, but back then I was walking, Ralph.
Riding a bicycle.
Riding a bicycle.
They don't do that much anymore, do they? Now, I think Merle Haggard refers to himself as poet of the common man, but we don't.
Well, his band, of course, is he titled the Strangers after his first big record.
Let's take Waylon Jennings, the what? They don't.
No, they don't have titles.
No.
They are, the bands do, but not the person.
Did you ever have one?
No.
I imagine you were just the little troubadour to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Little
I'm
E.T. Anybody ever call you that?
Listen, I've been called everything.
Ernest, I want you to name your kids, the full name of all the kids.
All 7 of them?
Yeah.
Do you have a long enough show for that?
I think so.
Justin Wayne Tubb, Violet Elaine Tubb, Earlene Dale Tubb, Oline Gale Tubb, Ernest Tubb Jr., Larry Dean Tubb, and Karen Deline Tubb.
You like Eanes, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I sort of hang on to those Eanes,
You got
Leans
7
and
kids.
7. Mm-hmm.
Tinker is Ernest Tubb Jr.
You left out
Yes.
his middle name, Ernest Dale.
Oh, Ernest Dale Tubb Jr. Yes, right.
I used to see Tinker on the Grand Ole Opry stage, sitting over there on a little bench, waiting for you to sing and then go home with you, I guess.
Right, and I think you probably saw Earlene Dale sitting over there, and then Ernest Tubb Jr., and then Oline Gale.
Now, what I want to know is, how old are these kids?
Well, now Earlene, I better not tell Violet Elaine's name. Scooter Bill, that's her nickname.
Okay, that's.
She might shoot me. She might be listening in.
But
anyhow,
she's about Justin's age.
She's 4 years younger,
and I'm 39.
Okay.
Now we don't want to tell her age.
No,
though.
don't tell her age. And then Earlene Dale is 23, Oline Gale is 22, and Ernest Tubb Jr. will be 18. The 12th of he's already 18. He was the last 12th of December. He was 18, and Larry Dean Tubb will be 17. He was just turned 16 this past May. Next May he'll be 17, and then Karen Deline is 14 years old, and she'll be 15 the 1st of May.
These kids are really growing up, aren't they?
They really are.
I remember when they were just little bitty kids. Ernest, I got to scrambling around through all your old records. I wondered how many singing partners you had in your career. Now, we will include the Wilburn brothers.
Right, and of course the late Red Foley and Miss Loretta Lynn. This is about covers it.
The Andrews sisters.
Oh, yes.
Did you record with the Andrews sisters?
I sure did. Yeah, back in 1948.
Weren't they recording with you and Bing Crosby at the same time?
Right. Mm-hmm. Actually, Decca, Mr. Dave Capp's idea was for Bing and I to record together. And so he said, when I got to California, he said, if we can catch him in California at the same time you're there. But he was in Canada hunting. So he called me and said, Bing has gone to Canada, so what do you think about the Andrews sisters? I said, I had a feeling this might happen, so I brought along a song that will fit the Andrews sisters and myself, I think, called Biting My Fingernails, Thinking of You. And so that's how that came about.
Didn't Bing Crosby cover you on several songs?
No, actually, just Walking the Floor Over You is the only one that he ever
I was thinking
recorded.
he did some others.
No, just the one.
Ernest, I think it would be safe to say that your inspiration throughout your career has been Jimmie Rodgers.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever meet Jimmie Rodgers?
Never got to meet him, Ralph. I had a chance, but I was quite young, and I was afraid to meet him because I was afraid that he might not measure up to what I felt, and I didn't want to spoil the feeling I had for him.
You used to sing a lot like him, didn't you?
I used to try to sing exactly like him.
Because I've heard, I don't know whether you people have ever heard any RCA Victor records by Ernest Tubb, but there were a few, and on those you sounded exactly like him.
This is when I was actually copying Jimmie Rodgers. And you know what I wish I had, though, Ralph? Between those records and Decca, there was 4 years there that I did not record anything. And say about 2 years after I made those records, I think I did my best singing and best yodeling, because I was real amateurish on those records. But I finally developed a very good yodel to where that people would hear me on the radio, and the friends would bet each other whether it was me or a Jimmie Rodgers record.
What happened to your yodel, Ernest?
Well, the doctor, I got some bad tonsils, and he cut my tonsils out, and he cut my yodeling right out with them.
And that was the end of that?
That was the end of that. I used to say I was going to sue him, and someone said, you ought to put him on a pension because you never made any money until you quit trying to sing like Jimmie Rodgers.
Did you try to do things like chime bells and some of those old yodel favorites?
No, actually, I never cared for those yodels. The only thing that, see, Jimmie Rodgers, the type yodeling that he introduced and did, it fit the song. See, the yodeling was in harmony with the song. If it's a sad song, he had a sad yodel, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I liked about his yodeling, because it had something to it other than just how high can you yodel and how long can you hold the yodel. I never cared for that a whole lot.
How many of his artifacts, things that belong to him, do you own?
Well, no, actually, very few. I have the guitar. Of course, this goes back to Anita, his daughter, you know. And I don't have any, really.
You have a guitar that was his, though.
I have his special guitar, his Martin, his favorite guitar, yes.
And doesn't Johnny...
I used it for many years, you know.
Doesn't Johnny Cash have a lantern that he used to use on the railroad?
I think Anita gave Johnny a lantern, and perhaps a cap, a brakeman's cap, you know.
And Hank Snow has a few items, too, doesn't he?
Yes,
Anita was Jimmie Rodgers' daughter.
Yes,
She's still living, isn't she?
Right, San Antonio.
When did Mrs. Rodgers pass away?
November the 28th, 1961, 13 years ago.
I met her through you.
Right.
At the Jimmie Rodgers Festival in Meridian, Mississippi, 1958.
Right, you are. She was a gracious lady.
Because I hooked a ride on your bus home.
I remember.
You know, she gave me one of his guitars, too, and I just recently turned it over to Roy Acuff, and it is on display, I understand, out at his museum at Opryland now.
Yeah, she gave Justin his Gibson guitar.
The Gibson guitar that he had.
You think there are a lot of phony ones around?
No, I don't think so, because he only had, I think, 4 altogether, and we know where all of them are except one. No, he had 5, I guess. Elsie McWilliams has one, and there's one. The Wayman guitar was stolen, and we've never located it.
I see. Of course, we're talking about the man who is often termed as the father of country music, Jimmie Rodgers. Do you think he was the father of country music?
I certainly do.
E.T., I want to ask you about being the innovator, and I think a lot of people may have forgotten this, but you had a lot of firsts, as I recall. The first entertainer, to my knowledge, that traveled by bus, even though it was a school bus. You can correct me on these things.
Well, I believe I was. It was a pretty lousy bus, but it got us there, you know, and it didn't, you know, it was pretty rough. But that's all. You couldn't buy anything during those days, you know. And so in order to get a school bus, I had to pay a sort of a premium for it, and maybe not for the bus, but had to buy expensive seats, you know, because it cost me quite a bit of money to get that old school bus.
Also, weren't you the first entertainer to bring the electric guitar to the Grand Ole Opry?
As far as I remember, Ralph, I think maybe Pee Wee King had electric guitar, but only as more or less like rhythm guitar, you know. I was the first one that featured a lead instrument, was the electric guitar as a lead instrument. I'm sure of that.
Also, when you came along, very few performers wore the Western glitter clothes, as I recall. I think Pee Wee King did, maybe Bob Wills.
Bob Wills, yes, and Pee Wee King. Here at the Opry, it was Pee Wee King. They wore the Western clothes. And Zeke Clements, I think, did before I came here. See, he'd already left when I came here. Zeke had, or left shortly after I came here.
I guess a lot of the entertainers of that day just wore the street clothes, didn't they?
Well, I believe most of them wore, like, I think Roy's group wore overalls, you know, overalls and blue shirts, work shirts, best I recall. And Oswald, I think he always had the big shoes and so forth. And as far as Roy, I think he dressed just about like he dresses now, you know.
You still wear the sequins?
I never wear, I never go much for the sequins or
what do you wear?
Just more or less plain Western clothes with maybe a little, you know, what you call them in the... But no beat. I never go for the piping. You know what I mean? I never go for the loud, the what you call it, the bead, the rhinestone. I never was much on that.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel an entertainer should dress in a special way?
I think they should dress a little bit special. I believe, because this is show business. You know, I don't say they should go in for a lot of sequins and. the rhinestone,
I
too
think
much
Porter,
of that.
though, would look naked if he didn't have his on.
Porter Wagner?
He's just not.
Yeah, he's I've
That's the
worn him
image
so
I've
long
always
now.
had of him. You know?
Yeah, he would look kind of funny in a business suit.
He would.
Yeah.
Ernest, you used to sing in the movies?
I did. Yeah, I did about 4 pictures. 2 westerns with Charles Starrett, then a picture called Jamboree that we had music in there, and then the last one was Hollywood Barn Dance. This was actually the only picture that I had star billing was Hollywood Barn Dance, and we got 13 songs in the picture.
What'd you sing in the picture?
Gee, I don't remember now. Ralph, 2 wrongs don't make a right, and of course Walking the Floor Over You, and I just can't think of all of them.
Ernest, did they strap guns on you and let you shoot it out with anybody?
Yes, they sure did. In the westerns with Charles Starrett, I remember one of the funny incidents that I was supposed to come in the door. The bad guy had my boss, the foreman of the ranch, or the owner of the ranch, up against the fireplace with a knife, one of these big hunting knives in his hand, and I'm supposed to come in and shoot and say drop it, you know, and he don't drop it, so I shoot the knife out of his hand. But the mic was for me to speak. See, I couldn't shoot the gun, and someone else had to shoot the gun, and so I got in, and it's time for me my cue to say drop it, and before I could drop it, the guy shot the gun and scared me and Charlie both, you know. But that was quite a mix-up, and so the man said, "Look, you're supposed to say drop this as soon as you walk in the door. You say it, because the prop man, he was going to shoot that gun, but I was too close to the mic. See, they couldn't let me shoot it, but I had to hold the gun.
Wasn't Lloyd Bridges in one of those early movies that you made?
He was in. Yeah, he was. He was in the second Western picture I made, and I said, Lloyd, this was like in '41. I said, I know I can't act. I came out here to sing a few songs. And I said, most of these people outside of the sheriff and Charlie Starrett, you're the only actor in this whole group, you know. And he was played the toughie part, you know.
He's the man who later became famous underwater, isn't he?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, I wanted to pick your brain for a moment about what it was like when you were a kid. At what age did you realize you were the son of a big singing star?
Oh, goodness. Let me...
Surely it didn't dawn on you for a long time.
Well, when I was about, let's see, 9 years old, I started going to Castle Heights Military Academy in Lebanon, Tennessee, and took some pretty rough hazing from the other boys in school, you know. Hey, sing me a little bit of Walking the Floor, you know, and I had a couple of fights over it. And
what were you fighting about?
Well, just making fun of country music and the Grand Ole Opry and my dad and
upholding country music.
Yeah,
I remember after he said
that, among other things.
I remember he said, I asked him why when I figured out that he wanted to go to show each Saturday instead of singing. I said, why don't you want to sing, son? You know, not that I didn't want to push him, I wanted him to do what he wanted to do. And he said, well, so Daddy said, I thought this was pretty intelligent for a 9-year-old kid. He said, because when I'm up there singing, and they applaud me. So I don't think they're applauding for what I do. I think they're applauding me because I'm Ernest Tubb's son. And you know, so I couldn't argue with that a whole lot.
Ernest, you know, we've done this whole show and have not mentioned the Ernest Tubb Record Shop one time. You've been in the record shop business a long time, haven't you?
I believe it's since, let's see, 28 years, I believe, Ralph, 28 or 9 years.
I know one time I wrote some liner notes for an album called the Ernest Tubb Record Shop, and you told me about, you were in business across the street from Hank Williams, weren't you?
Well, up the street. We were up, our first shop was on 7th Street, and Hank was up in the next block and put in a Western shop. This was after the record shop.
Now, but he was in the Western wear business,
yes.
Wasn't he? He and Audrey.
Yeah, and I remember one thing, he asked me how much money did I lose when I put in the record shop the first 2 years, you know, and I said, well, I lost $10,000 a year. He said, well, so then that won't be too bad if I don't lose but $20,000, you know.
Did you and Hank Williams were very close, weren't you?
Very, very close, Ralph.
Did you know Hank from the first time he came to Nashville?
Oh, yes. Well, it took me a year to get the people to be, the power people here to bring him in for the Grand Ole Opry.
You knew him then before?
He stole my show from me in 1943 down in Montgomery, Alabama.
You mean you went down there to pick?
He opened my show, yeah. He was on the station down there, and he opened my show. You remember Uncle Joe Frank that brought me here? He'd hired him, like we used to do. The local talent, they would plug your show for you. And he opened the show for me. And I said, who is this skinny kid? And he says, a kid named Hank Williams. And he took about 3 encores before they get him off the stage.
Did you say, get the hook?
No, you know what I said? I said, Joe, you should help this boy. This boy's got a lot of talent.
Ernest, you have an amateur show called the Midnight Jamboree that's broadcast over WSM. I say that because it is open to amateur talent, isn't it?
Well, we do have, yes. Of course, mainly we like to have the new recording artists and give them a chance to plug their record and so forth. But we do have some of the youngsters.
Well, I wanted to ask you, now I know you have the regular professional singers on that show. And if you're not there, somebody else is headlining the show.
They will MC the show.
But a lot of people want to know how they get on that show.
Oh, this is quite a problem. I wish we could put them all on, Ralph, but they should write in and send an audition tape, say at least a couple of months ahead of time, when they think they can.
Who does the auditioning?
Well, when I'm gone, which is most of the time, Olene, Mrs. E.T. does the audition and lines up the show.
Can't put them all on, though, can you?
No, I wish we could.
We are sitting here in the studio with Ernest Tubb and Justin Tubb. And Ernest, I wanted to ask you one more question about the famed Midnight Jamboree. And if it's unfamiliar to a lot of you daytime listeners, it's because you haven't stayed up late at night and listened by long distance to WSM to hear his show, which has launched the careers, I presume, of a lot of people. Can you name some of the people who started on that show that made it, Ernest?
Bobby Helms was one of the first ones, I think. And this was instrumental in getting his Decca contract on the Midnight Show. And then, of course, Elvis Presley. I think Elvis would have made it anyhow, though. But he was on when he had that first record out called Blue Moon of Kentucky.
What'd you think of him?
I liked him. I thought he was a very nice kid. He was about 17 and one of the few young kids that went home and wrote me a beautiful letter thanking me for making him feel so welcome in Nashville, Tennessee, and on the Midnight Jamboree.
Justin, can you think of any others?
George Hamilton IV, I believe, made one of his first appearances down there. He came over and
did.
We did I think you were doing a
telethon
up at the Tennessee Theater.
One of the first TV things we had here.
And he came down and was on the record shop.
That rings down the curtain on what I think has been a real terrific show. We want to thank an American legend, Ernest Tubb, for being our guest.
Thank you, Ralph, for asking me to be your guest. Enjoyed it.
And the son of an American legend, Justin Tubb.
Justin Wayne Tubb.
Justin Wayne.
I've enjoyed it, Ralph.
And Ralph, may I ask you who's going to be your guest next week?
I wish you hadn't asked because I'm not quite sure at this point.
Well, I know it'll be somebody that they'll enjoy hearing.
They'll have to tune in.
We got out of that, didn't we?
Yeah.